Welcome to the Creepin' It Real show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, otherworldly, and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow us on Twitter at creepin_it and like us on Facebook at The Creepin' It Real Show. Do you have a paranormal story you'd like to share with us? You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to the Creepin' It Real show. I hope everybody's got their full body foil onesies and hats and are ready to take this crazy journey with us this morning. And I hope everybody's staying healthy and warm. So with that, I will take it over to SoCal. Moni, how are you doing?
I am good. Everybody's freaking out about coronavirus and everybody's, because we're all going to conventions. Like people are in Chicago right now for them. All the comic people are doing different conventions and we're like, okay, nobody's shaking hands. We're not even fist bumping. We're going to foot bump everybody when we see them. So it's a little crazy.
Yeah, my boss, her husband works at Emory and he is basically the lead head surgical nurse over all the surgeons of the department. He runs the nurses and then also, is the head of surgery for nurses. And they work right next to the infectious disease department. He's, spoken with doctors and never has this ever happened. My boss said that he came home and was like, we need to have a month's of groceries at all times, just because when there's panic, people don't go to work. You just have to be careful. I did that last night. I went and got $400 worth of groceries. And because she's like, if he's telling us to do that, that is unheard of. He's never said this before. So there's some concern. And then last night, I went late because I didn't want to go when all the people were there.
Yeah.
And we went to the movies, me and Madeline, and then went to the grocery store. And they were also, thank God, restocking everything. So he said it was bananas. They're completely out of hand sanitizer. So I couldn't get that. But I did get most of everything I wanted. And then went to get gas. And 2 of the pumps were out of gas. And so I had to drive.
Nuts.
Yes. It's but that's the thing. Everybody panics. And it's not, it's a bad, the virus is bad. The death rate's higher than everybody's it's just the flu. It's not just the flu. Let's be real here. It is have a higher death rate. But that's not the concern. The concern is if it starts to spread, people will not get out. And if people don't get out, jobs don't get done. So that's the concern, But so Madeline was like, this is a lot of food. I was like, yeah, it's a lot of food. But who cares?
Teenagers, they're probably just going to eat it all. They're like, oh, we have extra snacks. Cool.
Jay was like, when we got home, he helped us unload. He's like, this is fantastic because the kid's in a growth spurt right now and does not stop eating. And I'm like, okay, eat everything that can go bad before you break open all the stuff I bought that can stay in the pantry. So anyway, hey, I'd rather be safe than sorry. So I just decided,
for sure.
Why not? If that's what he's saying, let's do it. So speaking of craziness, Yardley, I'm so happy you've survived Mardi Gras this year. It was a little rough.
So fun.
Looked like a blast, but also had a couple of rough patches. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Can't complain. Mardi Gras is always great. And, in addition to, my birthday is usually lands during that week as well. But yeah, Mardi Gras was great. There was a cloud over it because there were a couple of deaths concerning, the floats. So for the most part, there was kind of that haze of weirdness. And also because you had a death, I think it was on Thursday, and then another death happened on Saturday. It was at Endymion. And it actually happened right on the corner where we were because the last couple of years we've set up tents at the corner of South Galvez and Canal Street. And the accident literally happened by our tent. The police tape was wrapped around our tent. That's how close it was. It's pretty sad. But outside of it being carnival season, a lot of, the highlights, especially the Endymion Parade, which is the biggest one. When these accidents happen, they cancel the rest of the parade. And when the unfortunate thing happened. I think it was float 14. And, Endymion's like 30, maybe like 36 floats. So it was pretty sad because, everybody had been out there all day because the part of the parade route that we're on, the parade doesn't even get there till 6. So
oh gosh,
you already know everybody's been out there drinking since 10, cooking out or whatever. And this is like the final stretch. So it was pretty sad though. I mean, my rule is, I like to catch beads like, everybody else, but it's also one of those things where you're like, look, if you don't get the beads, you just got to let it go. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You have to let it go. And, it's just a sad thing. And the other thing that was kind of crazy is the man that passed away on Saturday was the same age as the woman who passed away, a couple days earlier during the Knicks parade. And her accident was a little bit different from his, but, it was the same outcome. But it was the same float that killed the rider. Yeah, the rider back in 2008. I guess a crew member fell off the float or something and got ran over in 2008. It was the same float.
Cursed float.
Time to retire float. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what everybody's saying. So right now, New Orleans is doing a lot of stuff to try to assess what they could do differently. But in both of these instances, it wasn't really the floats because they had banned like the tandem floats. And, a tandem float are the ones that are connected, that are pulled by a tractor.
Right.
So they banned that. But I'm just saying in both of those instances, it wasn't the float. It was the people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Drinking all day and, it's just a bad combination. When you got so many people crammed in a space, it's kind of like those people, and this gets really morbid, but at MARTA, there's people that fall onto the tracks, waiting for the MARTA train because, you get so crammed up in there trying to get in before, and get a seat, and people start pushing and shoving and people fall, in the train tracks. It's kind of stuff like that with and then add alcohol and shit, it's just a bad combination of stuff that accidents are going to happen. And honestly, I hate to say that I'm truly shocked that, I don't know how long it's been between deaths at Mardi Gras, but just 2 in a year to me is not bad, to be honest with you. I'm just pretty shocked.
Well, it's 2 that happened basically the same week. I mean, the last death was, I think it was 2008.
Yeah, that's shocking to me.
It's, so that's, I mean, for the most part, people try their best. Just like you said, everybody's hyped up and there's a lot of drinking and there's a lot of folks. So I'm surprised. I even, I joked to Carrie. I was like, how the hell you hadn't died in 8 years?
No shit.
She is serious about, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Trying to get that stuff. But, fortunately, everything went okay. You know what? My birthday was great.
Happy birthday.
I took Moni's advice and I went and saw a movie. So, everything worked out and,
awesome.
Back to work I go soon. So.
Well, speaking of Moni, we're now moving on to the What Are You Watching segment. And I also took Moni's advice. So I'm excited to hear about her. She was the first one of us to watch it. So why don't you talk about your recommendation for What Are You Watching?
Well, yeah. So I haven't watched too much on TV. I did see Midsummer. It's on Prime. It's Amazon streaming right now, so you can watch it for free. It's creepy, but I did a lot of fast forwarding because it's really, really. It's like 2.5 hours, and it's just it feels like it's moving in real time. So, if you want something disturbing but not necessarily scary, I know Christy, you watched it, right?
Which one?
Midsummer.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What did you think of it? Did you like that one?
It's so funny that you mentioned that because when I was looking for the 2 movies that I'm going to talk about this weekend, I saw the advertise it again. And at first when I watched it, I was like, this was probably 3 months ago that I watched it. And it's kind of grown on me since I watched it. And I haven't watched it again. It just, the ending, how bananas it gets.
It's super fucked up. Yeah,
I appreciate the build up more when I reflected back later, because I was kind of like, wow, there was a lot we really didn't need, but we can't. It's like he's so interesting in that he always does these really complex character builds. Yeah. And I did later, because it was long and it did, you really don't get the gist of the really fucked up stuff till the end, but then I thought about it when I saw it again, and I was kind of like, man, I really appreciate that now. Like, yeah, that's a slow build for sure, that you, even after you watch the movie, it takes time to kind of like sort through everything and be like, whoa.
And at no point was I scared, but like today, it's still like, wow, that thing that happened at the end is fucked up. Like,
it
I'm still kind of like,
with you. Yes, it stays with you, and I think that's his magic. Like, Hereditary was a shock to me, and it was fucked up, and it was just fucked up the whole time. This one is a little bit more of like just a think piece almost about how you would go from what the group that they were to the ending, and how the ending happened, and you're just kind of like, wow, that escalated quickly.
Yeah. Well, part of it too is like you start to almost like identify, maybe it's because it's so long and you see the customs all the way through of this other culture, but you're just like, I mean, it's just their culture. Maybe like if you just leave them alone to do their thing, but yeah, it's pretty messed up.
The lesson is like, and I think that's a lot of the part of being a human is like, we just insert ourselves into anything and everything and don't really respect it. Excuse me. And so that's kind of like what the whole message was at the end was, you don't just walk onto people's, lives and their superstitions and expect that you're just can play along, if that makes any sense. So it did. Again, it took me a long time to truly look back and go, that was actually a good movie. I didn't think it was bad at first when I watched it. It was just kind of a
It's really long. It's 2.5 hours. I did some fast forwarding, but so Midsummer, that was same makers as Christy mentioned as Hereditary, A24. So it's available for streaming on Prime. But what you guys were talking about, what you set me up to talk about is Invisible Man. So I was having a long, rough week, and I watched a interview with Elizabeth Moss, who is the lead. She's so good. God. She's the lead in Handmaid's Tale. And it's hard to say you like that show because it's pretty super fucked up, but I knew her depth as an actress. And so, we've seen a lot of Blumhouse films, and they vary in ability to really tell. They're always entertaining, but I feel like their ability to tell a good story and really build character depth has been meh. And so I'd seen the trailers, and I was like, this is probably stupid. And then I saw her talking about it, and it led me to and she was talking about what other actors are in it. It has the guy from Hill House who plays the drug-addicted brother. He's super, super cute. And it has some other people that you'll recognize when you watch it. But anyway, I really ended up enjoying it. I went to see it randomly on a Thursday. I was just like, this week sucks. I'm going to go see a scary movie. And it hits every level. It's a little bit, I hate to say triggery to sound all wussy, but if you've ever been in an abusive relationship or controlling situations or that kind of thing, there's that's what it's about. Right. So it has that kind of psychological horror too of the ick factor of someone controlling your life even before all this starts happening. And then obviously a lot of cool twists and turns, a lot of stuff you don't see coming, literally don't see because it's invisible. What did you guys think about it?
I thought it was cool. I definitely thought that it was a solid movie. And just like you were saying, there's a psychological aspect to the movie that's very cool, and it draws you in. It took me a while to recognize the actor, the one that you were saying that was haunting from Hill House. I was like, is that the same dude? And, I ended up looking it up, and it was the same guy. I think he lost a little weight, though, because I think he was a little heavier in Hill House.
In this movie, which is, kind of suits what he was going on.
Yeah. So, he's all cleaned up in this, but he did a great job. Elizabeth Moss, she killed it. And if anybody goes to see it, which I highly recommend, there are some kind of behind the scenes things that how they show you how they were able to pull off, some of the struggle scenes in the movie. And it's very cool how they did that. But it's definitely a recommend from me. I had a good time. I didn't feel like I went and saw it in RPX. So it had that cool sound system. And, a lot of this movie is kind of quiet and you're just kind of listening to things. And I think that was really cool, being able to hear a lot of stuff that you might not pick up in standard. But I'm definitely going to co-sign. People should definitely go and see it. And the only thing about it is I know that it's got very good ratings and I want it to do well, but I almost don't want it to do so well where they want to try to do another one.
Yeah.
Unless they do
I think they
Invisible
set it
Woman.
up. I think they set it up to do another one with her with the suit. She took the suit. Like,
oh my God, spoilers.
well,
yeah, that was a big
right.
spoiler too. But anyway,
Sorry.
no, but there, said I think they could
alert.
piggyback off the Invisible Woman, so I can definitely see it coming. So we'll see where it goes.
I was like, when they first started advertising this movie, I was like, oh, like I just had like this. I don't know. I just thought it was going to be cheesy. I had no interest in seeing it. I just have a hard time placing how you would do a story about somebody invisible. And I think they did the perfect, like, I loved this movie. It was so good. And Aldous Hodge, holy crap, is he hot? Like, wow.
Yeah.
I was like, who is this guy? He is smoking hot. His his arms, I was like, oh my God, this guy. Okay.
Oh, even when he comes running at them in the beginning, which is not a spoiler, when he comes running at them like to chase her after the car, you know, I was like, damn, like he just comes like a bullet and he's so fit.
I'm talking about the other guy, the cop.
Oh, okay, not a spoiler. There's a fight scene that he's in with the invisible person.
Yeah.
And there's a couple plot holes which I overlook, but do you guys feel like he would have been beaten that easily? He's so fit and he's a police officer, and I know you can't see the person, but you can feel it's a physical person. Like, do you feel like he would have had his ass kicked that badly?
I can't even try to put in mentally try to imagine what it's like fighting somebody you can't see. So I like gave a pretty big
leniency to that.
Yeah, I thought he might get a couple of good swipes in or something, just because you know the guy's got to be close to you if he can hit you. So just blindly, trying to. But I think the point is, and we can talk about this later because it was funny because when me and my daughter left, we were talking about it and we kind of worked through some of the things that we thought were plot holes that we were like, oh, this is why this, and it filled everything in. And we were like, oh, wow, okay, now it even made more sense because there was a lot of different things that were happening at the end where I was like, how did this here and this person here and this, and that doesn't make any sense. And then as we talked about it, it was like, oh, okay. But I loved it. I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic. I thought Elizabeth Moss was really good. I loved how they did this because I really went in with super low expectations. So I think like when you can really turn something around, Invisible Man to me is just cheesy. So I was really happy with it.
And then, that was me still. I was just going to say, I watched the Candyman trailer and I posted it to our Facebook page. And I'm going to let Yardley talk about what he watched, but I'm going to chime in when he talks about the Candyman one.
Well, I saw the trailer. I thought that it looked good. The one thing about their trailers, I think a lot of people think that they figured out what it's going to be. And I already know that Jordan Peele kind of, whatever's obvious, that's not going to be what it is. You know what I mean? In the trailer. But I thought that it was solid. I got very excited, when I saw it. And I've seen it a few times, but one of the things that I did pick up was that Vanessa Williams, who was in the original Candyman, she's playing a character, Anne-Marie McCoy, and Abdul Mateen's character is Anthony McCoy, which was her baby from the original Candyman. So that baby
no way.
Yeah, so the baby that, I can't remember her name, that she saved at the end of the original Candyman when she was burning up. Yeah, that's the kid that grew up to be the artist that's in this one. So that's kind of...
They're not doing cool. Like a remake. They're doing like a...
Yeah, he called it a spiritual sequel to the original. And then, so once I saw that she was in it, and she looks like she hasn't aged much at all, Vanessa Williams. But I do think that that's kind of a cool concept, that child that she saved at the end ends up being the artist that's the main character in this one. So I'm curious about it. I don't want to stay on it long, but they're definitely going to get my money in June.
Yeah, a couple Easter eggs. Tony Todd, if you watch it on the big screen especially, you can tell Tony Todd is in the reflection. At one point, he walks by a car, and Tony Todd's in the reflection as Candyman. So I knew we would see him at some point, but it's super exciting that even in the trailer we got to see him.
Oh, yeah, the de-aged Tony Todd. It looks pretty cool. There's definitely a lot of things in that trailer that the more you watch it, you'll pick up on a lot of clues, including callbacks to the original Candyman and other movies that Jordan Peele's a fan of.
I watched the trailer at the movie theater, and I didn't watch it, from the link y'all sent. And I was at the I call it movie studio grill or whatever it's called. And this lady was taking somebody's order right in front of me. So I had this big head right in front of the entire screen the whole time. I was like, move out of the way, trying to see because they did the trailer for Candyman last night while waiting for the Invisible Man. I was just like, no. I was
I know you guys still haven't seen Watchmen, which I recommend to everyone as one of the best shows in the past 12 months. Anyway, that's an amazing show. It's on HBO though. But anyway, the lead guy that plays Cal, that plays also someone else that you'll know, big spoiler, so I'm not going to say it, but the lead guy for Candyman is the same guy, and he is a really good actor in addition to being gorgeous. So I'm super excited about this movie on every level.
Good. Is that it for you, Yardley, or?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I'm pretty sure that they'll have probably a full trailer coming out at some point, but June is quite a while away.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I will talk about the two movies that I watched this weekend. I was blessed to watch 3 good movies, one being The Invisible Man and 2 being these really fucked up movies that I watched on my movie app that I have on my Apple TV. The first one is Color Out of Space. And I really don't want to like Nicolas Cage. I really don't. I just find him, I don't know, in his personal life, he's just a weirdo. But now he was in Mandy, and now he's in this movie, and he does such a good job that I'm like, I have to give him props. This one got 6.2 on IMDb, which again meets my, if it's over 5 points, I'm going to watch it. A story of cosmic terror about the Gardeners, a family who moves to a remote farmstead in rural New England to escape the hustle of the 21st century. They are busy adapting to their new life when a meteorite crashes into their front yard. The mysterious aerolite seems to melt into the earth, infecting both the land and the properties of space and time with a strange, otherworldly color. To their horror, the Gardner family discovered that this alien force is gradually mutating every life form that it touches, including them. So it was an interesting, I would say it's like a cross between, is it Annihilation? Is that the movie that had Natalie Portman in it that we reviewed?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I would say it's a cross between that and it's just, I don't know, something with aliens. It's also got Chong, Cheech and Chong, and he plays a hysterical role in here. So it's definitely worth the watch. I wouldn't say it was the greatest, but I would say I enjoyed it. I thought it was different, and the ending, you're just like, damn. So I would definitely recommend that one. And then I was so excited to get to see this movie, Come to Daddy. We reviewed Housebound a couple of years ago. It was one of the first movies I think Yardley or Moni recommend us reviewing, and we really enjoyed that movie because it's one of those just off the wall, bizarre, with kind of like you're laughing, but you're not sure if you should or not type. Well, this is the guy that did Aunt Thompson, who did Housebound, did this movie, and he has not lost his touch in any way. This is probably one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. I mean, unless you're talking about some of these weird art house horrors that I've watched that I'm kind of shaking my head. Really solid, weird plot. It's got, what's his name? Elijah Wood, and it plays the main character, and his haircut alone, you're just going to be like, what the hell? But it's about his name's Norval. Norval's life has been, to put it lightly, difficult. Currently living with his mom, the troubled young man is coming off alcohol-related struggles. So when he receives an unexpected letter from his estranged father requesting a visit, Norval catches a bus up to his dad's secluded and scenic waterfront home. Maybe reconnecting with his father will give Norval the emotional fulfillment he's been lacking. Before long, though, he notices something off about his dad, an uneasy feeling triggered by inappropriate comments and a possible overdependence on booze. Norval quickly realizes that his hope for father and son bonding is doomed. Instead of a family reunion, he finds himself in a waking nightmare. So I would recommend this movie for sure. It is just really bizarre. It keeps you on your, just like Housebound, it keeps you on your toes. You have no idea what to think or expect, and it delivers. And I can usually guess, like all through The Invisible Man, I was driving Madeline nuts because I was calling out what was about to happen. I was calling out like the shocks and the surprises because I can't help it. I'm bad at that. And I could not guess one thing that was coming in this movie. So y'all got to check it out. With that, I will move on really quick to a couple little housekeeping notes. You can sign up to via text by texting CREEP to 21,000, and then next week you can start texting us questions and we'll answer them. I haven't figured out how we're going to do it, whether we're just going to take a segment on a regular show or do a special show, depending on, I guess, how many questions we get. So we don't sell your information or do anything weird with your phone number. It's just for you guys to be able to ask us questions if you're listening.
I mean, there's some ritualistic shit, but other than that.
You're going to love that. If you guys are listening to a show and we're wrong, or you want to ask us a question about a subject, or you just nosy about us, just sign up. It's 21,000, and all you have to do is text CREEP. Also, thank you to April, our newest Patreon member. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure she has a daughter named Fiona, and I would like to give her a shout out as well.
Oh, we know them. Hello.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's her. I'm if I'm misspeaking, I apologize. Also, we just hit 2,000 downloads, so hey, thanks for that. That's not bad. And
party.
Yeah, celebrate. All right, so, we're almost 30 minutes into our show, and we are going to finally talk about the main subject, but lots of good stuff happening, lots of good movies, and we get excited and we talk about those, and I don't regret it. If you regret it, turn us off. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to talk about Project Stargate. First, I'll cite my sources. Historycollection.com has a lot of information. I got a lot of the character, like the people that were in the program from the actual CIA government library website where they released all these docs, and then Gaia, is that how you say it? GAIA, have a ton of stories about Project Stargate as well, and that's where I get the stuff where we start getting into the weird like things that they saw. So those are my sources. We're going to talk about really quick kind of what it is. The Cold War was a strange period in American history. Paranoia was rife, nerves were tense, and governments were desperate. It was also strange timing in that it coincided with the zeitgeist of conscious awareness where love, psychedelia, and New Age mysticism were the norm. But it seems that only at a time of this clashing cultural sentiment could something like the Stargate program have come to fruition. The Stargate program was a CIA-funded project that intended to cultivate psychic phenomena, or PSI, for espionage purposes. Over the course of its tenure, the program received roughly $20 million to hone in the psychic abilities of its members in order to pinpoint military targets for intelligence agencies. Project Stargate is now allegedly defunct, though that is an up for debate conversation that we won't have, but there are some possibilities that they just said it's closed and it's really not. Though its surviving members remain strong proponents of their work from the program's heyday. In fact, several former members continue to pursue related work within the realm of parapsychology and other esoteric fields. So this all started when they found out in some backwards way that Russia was kind of developing some sort of psychological way of figuring out what the United States is doing. So the Soviets believed in something called bioenergetics, which is the belief that all living things give off energy. So if they were able to tap into that energy, they could read minds and move things at will. Unlike their other experiments, American scientists did not really want to dive into the ideas of bioenergetics because they didn't think there was enough to go on. The United States government did, however, think that studies with hypnosis were very interesting. They were interested in knowing about the power of suggestion and what it can do to someone's mind. While information about hypnosis, I almost said hypothesis, was still new in the 70s, it is widely recognized today as a legitimate psychological technique that can help people cope with trauma, relax, quit smoking, and so many other things. So in January 2017, the CIA released millions of documents related to its experimental forays during the Cold War. Members of the program, including Major Ed Daines, Ed May, Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, Joseph McMoneagle, and others have experienced a renewed interest in their work and the proof they discovered in the anomalous reality of psychic phenomena.
All right, so remote viewing is the ability to acquire information about a distant or non-local place, person, or event without using your physical senses or having any prior knowledge. Remote viewing is different from natural psychic receptivity in that it is trained skill that anyone can learn, and it's latent in all of us. A trained remote viewer can identify specific details of a target irrespective to the distance with significant accuracy, based solely on geographic coordinates. And those coordinates don't have to be earthly. They could be coordinates on a distant planet, like the time the CIA remote viewed an ancient civilization on Mars, or when the Ingo Swann, one of the most illustrious members of Stargate, viewed the rings around Saturn before they were even discovered by NASA. Swann was one of the program's founding members who solidified his place in ufological history in the Book of Penetration, the question of extraterrestrial and human telepathy, which detailed his time in the Stargate program, as well as his alleged contact with extraterrestrials and UFOs. In fact, the method that became the standard for Project Stargate was developed by Swann at the Stanford Research Institute in coordination with Puthoff and Targ. The Ingo Swann method forced subjects to slow down and not make inferential leaps when they started to receive information on a target. Swann knew targets weren't revealed in an instant flash, but rather through a slow trickle of information. Lynn Buchanan realized that during a successful RV session, one subconsciously taps into a greater shared system of consciousness, a universal consciousness. Swann would teach subjects not to be psychic, but rather to prevent their analytical mind from interfering with the vision in order to prevent false positives. Viewers were taught to write down everything that comes to mind, no matter how bizarre or abstract, and to never jump to conclusions. In those initial days at SRI, Swann worked with Targ and Puthoff, two physicists who have continued to do their work today in equally fascinating fields. Puthoff worked as a scientist for the CIA in other regards and is now part of Tom DeLonge's UFO disclosure movement, To the Stars Academy. He is listed as a co-founder of the company and vice president of science and technology, researching lasers and exotic propulsion systems.
So I had put in our chat that there is a documentary out there that anybody can watch. It's on Amazon Prime. It's probably other places. That's just where I found it, called Third Eye Spies. It's 2 hours, so it's quite a commitment, but I thought it was pretty fascinating to watch, and they really dive deep into the program, and they stay pretty on top of the only the stuff that pertain to what the military asked them to do and the government versus some of the stuff they kind of go off, I wanted to focus on some of the other crazier stuff that they say that they viewed as well. But this one really does stick to just exactly what they did for the government. And I thought it was pretty good. Moni, did you get a chance to check it out?
I watched a little bit of it, but I didn't get to focus because kids were going in and out. So
I understand that. I was there many years ago. Now I'm like, where are my kids? Because they're teenagers and they're in their little holes of bedrooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. So if anybody wants to check that out, I don't think that I put in there some of the stuff, but like one of the instances, somebody was testing them because they didn't believe in this stuff. And so they gave him the random quote unquote coordinates, and the guy drew out this entire military compound. And the guy looked at it and was like, "You're completely wrong. I don't even know what this is. Actually, this was the coordinates to my mountain cabin." Well, what he didn't, the guy who gave the coordinates didn't know is literally right on the other side of the mountain was a secret military compound. So the guy had just missed the coordinates a little bit and had gone a little bit further. And instead of drawing the dude's cabin, just went a couple of miles onto the other side of the mountain and drew what he saw over there. And if you look at the overhead map, there it matches perfectly with the sketch this guy drew. So it's really interesting stuff and what they accomplished, and whether you believe it or not, they at the end they pretty much said that 80% accuracy, which that ain't bad. So the government, said we closed it because there wasn't enough evidence, but that's actually not true at all. So we'll kind of dive into all of that as well.
Super interesting. So, regarding Targ is now retired but continues to author books and give speeches on ESP, including his now famously banned TED Talk. During his presentation, Targ says he believes we live in a non-local space-time, but that the idea is nothing new. The quantum learning of Schrödinger and other physicists proved this in the past, leading Targ to believe there is a connection between psychic phenomena and quantum physics. Russell Targ banned TED Talk. In mid-2017, Russell was invited to speak for a Hollywood edition of TED Talk. Its producer was canceled, and she posted the talks online. I think she meant its production was canceled. And anyway,
so they filmed everything, and it was ready to be released. And TED Talks saw it and canceled the whole series.
Interesting. This is a talk I produced. As of today, it has 800,081 and 25 views, 12,000 likes, and over 10,000 shares. Without having seen this talk or talks by Larry Dossey, MD, and Marianne Williamson, TED decided that my fully sponsored TEDx West Hollywood program was unacceptable and canceled my license. They said if your program is allowed to proceed, it will truly damage other TEDx organizers' ability to recruit scientists and other speakers. I had 2 weeks to regroup, and I paid for putting on the program myself. As of this year, Targ's video has 4 million views. Well, I'd like to see it now. I like banned stuff.
I know, right?
One of the experiments conducted with psychic powers was trying to get remote viewers to identify objects that are out of view, which could be extremely useful in identifying what sort of weapons the enemy has. The target object was a gold Native American necklace. It was made up of a chain of gold spears with larger balls in the center, and they gradually became smaller. Each of these gold balls was etched with designs. The remote viewer was given clay so they could recreate the shape of the target object, and they were asked to describe the history of the people who made it. Some of the viewers got it completely wrong. One person wrote down information about the Isuzu Japanese car manufacturers. Another person described people-shaped objects, and others said it was a teacup or a bowl. A few did, however, make small balls out of the clay, which is accurate to what the necklace looked like. The most accurate description of the history was someone describing round gold shapes that were handmade by several people who had to bang on metal. He described someone with dark hair and skin, which would match Native Americans. However, the answer was still pretty vague, and it may have just been a good guess.
So the actual object was a Native American squash blossom. I don't know if anybody knows what those are, but they have the horseshoe at the bottom, and they're really ornate, and then they have the beads that go all the way up. They are Native American, and so it was really interesting that this person actually did describe and somebody that would look like a Native American making the necklace as well, not even just what the necklace was. So pretty interesting stuff. Another one of the more recognized and successful students at Project Stargate was Joseph, I gave him to myself, McMoneagle. I don't know how to say his name. In 1981, McMoneagle viewed a clandestine Soviet shipyard where the Russians were constructing a new type of submarine, bigger and more advanced than anything in the United States arsenal. McMoneagle viewed the hull being put together with a novel technique never before built in such a way. When he described the hull being put together in 2 pieces, marine engineers laughed at him and wrote off his vision as nonsense. But eventually, intelligence confirmed his revelations and the existence of the Russians' Akula submarine, a behemoth capable of carrying up to 200 nuclear warheads. The discovery confirmed that Russia was ahead of the Cold War arms race. While Joe was staying with longtime CIA-friendly remote viewer Robert Monroe at his property in Virginia, Monroe received instructions from the CIA for a new remote viewing mission. A small envelope was sent, which Robert kept in his shirt pocket unopened. From inside Monroe's specially designed sensory deprivation tank, Joe focused on the sealed envelope in Robert's pocket. Unknown to Monroe or McMonigal, written on a small card inside the envelope were time-space coordinates far away from our own planet Mars, 1 million years BC. Here's what Joe saw. An old sandy pyramid so tall it boggles the mind, later estimated to be some 20 kilometers or 12 miles high. It emerges from a deep depression in the ground. Vast storms swirl across the sky. It seems a cataclysm has occurred. Going back in time, it is like night and day. The sandy pyramid is now shimmering and metallic, and vague forms of gigantic thin people can be made out. They say they are an ancient race, doomed to die if those who left in search of another home do not return. While his handler gave him a few different sets of coordinates to take a look at before, Joe fizzled out. His main area of focus was later revealed to be the Cydonia region of Mars. Two unexplained geological formations on this barren Martian plain were first photographed by Viking 1 spacecraft in 1976. The face on Mars and a mysterious mountain that eerily resembles a giant pyramid. So I didn't get into the really detailed piece of this story, but from what Joe says, first of all, and he's not the only one, when he remote views to other planets or to see something that kind of revolves around aliens, quote unquote, they are aware he's there and he can see, and they actually can interact at times. So this is what he's talking about, that
sounds super dangerous to let them know you're like spying in on them.
But so here's what Joe says about this whole story that they don't put, because it's just, there's so much detail, is that they apparently were about to die out, and some of them did find another home, and that was Earth, and that kind of fills in the piece of the giants puzzle, because they were large and taller than normal humans, but they were human-like. Anyway, that's kind of what a lot of people say about this story. Who knows? I mean, it was 1 million years ago, so we weren't, not that we know of, around 1 million years ago. So I don't know how that all plays out, but it was pretty interesting that he, not even knowing that he was supposed to go to Mars in the pocket of the coordinates, that's where he went, and that was actually where he was supposed to go. So anyway.
All right, well, let's talk about Ingo Swann. So Ingo Swann, an artist and renowned psychic from New York, was invited to participate in Project Stargate. The CIA wanted to see if they could train their psychic agents to move things with their mind, and they believed Swann was a good candidate in the use of psychokinesis. In one experiment, a psychic known as Ingo Swann was shown an instrument and how it works. They asked him to use his mind to alter the behavior of the instrument. With each experiment, they brought Ingo Swann further and further away until they were separated by two large steel walls. In 80% of the sessions, they saw significant results that the instrument moved. They had run the experiment with several other candidates whose results were closer to 30% accuracy. After this experiment, the CIA was so convinced that he really did have psychic powers that they put Ingo Swann in charge of more projects. During the 1970s, there had never been any satellites sent to the planet Jupiter. NASA had just launched a satellite to Jupiter called Pioneer 10, and they were curious to see if they could send a psychic probe to the planet at the same time and see if the remote viewing descriptions matched the reality of the mysterious planet. Both Ingo Swann and a second agent named Harold Sherman were placed in sensory deprivation tanks and asked to remote view to another planet. Their descriptions of Jupiter were recorded independent of one another, and yet they both described almost identical visions. Their descriptions are so similar. It is truly like they rehearsed their lines beforehand, but they had no way of knowing that they were 100% accurate to the reality. They both described multicolored streams of thick clouds that surrounded the planet, harsh storms, the big red spot, and floating crystals. In the year 2000, NASA launched the Juno satellite to take high-definition photographs of Jupiter. We now know that the surface of Jupiter looks exactly like what Swan and Sherman described.
So is any of this starting to kind of ring a bell about a show that we all watch and have actually reviewed on here that that is based on sort of like the story of the deprivation tanks and seeing things, Stranger Things.
Oh, duh, yeah.
Number 11, or what, isn't that 11? Is her
11.
name? Yeah. So that's basically where Stranger Things got the bargain base of of her and what she was doing in that laboratory is this
cool.
program.
It's cool because I know there's a little bit of obviously historical context, even though it's obviously not nonfiction. But
Right.
anyway, after the success of Inigo Swan and Harold Sherman's remote viewing of Jupiter in the 1970s, the CIA decided to see what was on Saturn's largest moon, Titan. Scientists already knew that Titan has a thick atmosphere similar to the Earth. From a distance, it looks like as if it might even contain water. Without having a probe on Titan to confirm any of this, they wanted to see if a remote viewer could give them any additional information about the moon's surface that might be confirmed later. While most CIA files will identify the name of the participant in each remote viewing study, this particular case involving the Titan remote viewing was left anonymous. However, the handwriting of the viewer was very near perfect, which has historians speculating that it was a woman. According to the viewer, they saw that the moon was inhabited by aliens that looked exactly like human beings. Maybe it was inhabited by human beings. She described a scene of two good-looking male technicians. Yeah, she remembered that.
It's a woman, all right.
Yep. Supervised by an attractive woman, so she was mad about it,
Yeah,
with
exactly.
shoulder-length hair in a green lab coat. She also described an apparent base at the top of Mount Hayes, Alaska, that was run by these aliens and looked like human beings. Throughout her report of the vision, she made it seem as though she believed these aliens could easily come and go from the Earth as they pleased. Tinfoil hat shit.
Mhm.
There was a particular subgroup of UFO enthusiasts that believe the aliens walk among us. I've seen that movie, They Live. And that they choose to breed with attractive blonde humans. Okay, specific. It seems like this remote viewer's visions aligned with their personal beliefs. In these notes, the viewer also wrote that she saw another alien that was shaped like a human with a long skinny neck, but its face was totally blank, ooh, creepy, without any definitive features. She also claimed that she was invited to come see their alien operations, brown chicken, brown cow, as if she was actually present or abducted through her mind. The way this vision is described, it sounds much more like a dream rather than a typical remote viewing observation. She described yet another vision of a robot in South America that was aware of her presence as well. At the end of this session, the remote viewing monitor had listened to all of these stories, wrote, "No target, not verifiable." Clearly, this sounded like something more out of a science fiction novel, rather than anything the CIA could actually use to help them gain more knowledge about Titan's atmosphere.
So a lot of the people that did this remote viewing program, the heads of it, like Ingo and Russell Targ, all of them were not, they were from the Stanford research, but the people that worked under them were all in the government or the military. So that's kind of what's interesting about this program is they didn't just like run out into the United States and grab a bunch of psychics. They actually recruited people in the military or that worked for the government. We're going to talk about Frank Olson. So in 1953, a man named Frank Olson was a secret agent for the CIA. His family was shocked to turn on the news and learn that he jumped out of a window during a business trip. He never showed any signs of depression, and it did not make any sense why he would kill himself. They were told that he was part of a secret government project that involved LSD, and he could not handle the drugs in his system. He went crazy and jumped out the window on the 13th story of the Pennsylvania Hotel in New York City. A few years after his death, the CIA officially acknowledged their use of psychedelic drugs in their experiments. The original autopsy report, which was provided by the CEA, claimed that he had cuts and abrasions on his body because of the fall. However, in 1994, after interviewing some of his father's friends who worked with him in the CIA, Frank's son, Eric Olson, became suspicious that they had lied about his true cause of death. He decided to exhume his father's body. Sure enough, the second autopsy, which was performed by the George Washington University Law Center, showed completely different results than the one provided by the CIA. It showed blunt force trauma to the head, and there were no scratches or lacerations. Eric Olson now believes that his father was involved with MK Ultra. That's another project that I want to talk about after this, and Project Stargate. Olson knows that his father was genuinely a good person and he would have had moral issues with many of the experiments that were going on. He believes that his father was murdered in order to keep him silent. After performing the autopsy, Olson had held a press conference on his front lawn. He wanted to expose the CIA for killing his father. TV cameras and reports showed up to cover the story, but no one included his conspiracy theories about the CIA in their official reports, except for a documentary filmmaker who was looking into Project Stargate. Instead, of the reporters spun it as human interest story of a son who was grieving his father. The story of Frank Olson has been investigated in multiple documentaries, including the Unsolved Mysteries TV series, the Netflix docuseries Wormwood, and more. His story also inspired a suicide written into the script of The Men Who Stare at Goats, but in the movie, it was a catalyst to end the psychic project rather than spur on more funding. So there are other people, and this is the ones that actually worked for the project, who have different theories on what happened to Frank. And yes, they think he was murdered, but they think that it was done via remote viewing. Like, somebody either remote viewed, somehow had managed, because they were also studying how to manipulate objects and so they think that somebody, either the Russians or another, somebody in the program in the United States, killed him via remote viewing. And they were also talking about the possibility that the Russians used that gas that they have, that they kill people, and somehow managed to not remote view it, but the other ability that they have. I don't know. There's a lot of different, you know how that is. It's like once there's an unknown, everybody feels kind of their own theory into that hole. And so you get just a whole gambit. But they talk in depth about him in the Third Eye Spies documentary that I saw. And it's fascinating how everybody, and even one of the guys, Tark, was just adamant that he was murdered by the Russians. And another person in the program who was like his peer came and sat down with him and was like, that's not what happened. Here's what happened. And then he throws out his theory. And they're kind of having dueling banjos of what the theory and why theirs fit. So very interesting stuff.
All right, well, let's talk about Uri Geller. In the 1970s, Uri Geller was a famous psychic and illusionist from Israel that appeared on TV to show off his ability to bend spoons and read minds. While many people assumed these were just parlor tricks, the scientists at Project Stargate believed that he could be an excellent case study. In August of 1973, the CIA spent a week working with Uri Geller to test his psychic abilities. Over the course of 8 days, they conducted different experiments every day and recorded the data. They had Geller sit in an electronically shielded room, which they described to be a double-walled, insulated space where he could not have possibly received any type of radio communication or cheat the test in any way. There was an intercom that allowed Uri to speak to the scientists, but he stayed in the room during the entire experiment. On the first day, the scientists pulled out a large dictionary, flipped through the pages, and landed their finger on a random word. They asked Geller to read their minds and identify the word, even though he obviously could not see the book. The word was fuse, and he drew a firecracker with a fuse coming out of one end. The next word was bunch, and the dictionary included an image of a bunch of grapes. Geller explained that in his mind's eye, he could see purple circles with water dripping off of it. So he drew grapes. In the days that followed, the CIA asked him to do several more experiments. Not all of them were successful, but the vast majority of them were eerily accurate. They moved on from mind reading and took him to a computer lab. One of the computers was randomly generating images, and he was asked to draw what the computer showed on the screen. He correctly guessed a kite and a church. In another experiment, they called up a random CIA agent in an office on the East Coast and asked him to draw a picture of the first thing that popped into his mind. The agent on the phone was drawing an image of two mountains with the sun in the top right-hand corner. Uri Geller drew two zigzag lines in the same shape as the mountains with a circle in the upper right corner. In many of these cases, Geller could not tell what the actual object was, or he guessed very close to it. Like when someone drew a camel, Geller drew a horse instead. By the end of the 8-day trial, the CIA was convinced that Uri Geller did, in fact, have psychic powers. A few years later, however, he was exposed on TV as a fraud when a talk show switched out his props, proving that he could not actually bend spoons with his mind. Project Stargate was a top-secret experiment, so no one could release the documents that showed that these tests conducted by the U.S. government. During the Uri Geller tests, there was a day when one of the scientists drew a picture of a rabbit before Geller had even arrived, and it was locked in a cabinet, so there was no way that he could have influenced the image. He could not correctly guess rabbit, but he asked in particular if the scientists had drawn it. When they said yes, he tried to blame it on not having a great psychic connection with that particular scientist. There has also never been a rational explanation as to how he could have known what was on the computer screen, since it would have been impossible to influence the machine simply by talking.
Interesting. So now we have David Morehouse. In 1979, a man named David Morehouse joined the U.S. Army. In 1987, he was shot by a stray bullet in the helmet during a training exercise, which knocked him unconscious. He had a dream about an angel, and his entire life changed. He started having strange dreams and felt as if he could see through the eyes of the people around him. He went to an Army psychologist about the visions, fully expecting to be diagnosed with mental illness. Instead of calling him crazy, the doctor introduced him to Project Stargate, who were putting together a group of psychic warriors, and they asked Morehouse to join. They were all living in a shack in the middle of Maryland called Fort Meade. David Morehouse went through training sessions where he acted as the viewer, and the second person, or monitor, would give him random coordinates on a map, and he was asked to describe his surroundings. Without any idea where those coordinates actually were, Morehouse was able to accurately describe foreign locations. The CIA called upon David Morehouse in two specific cases. First was the capture of a Marine named William Higgins in Lebanon. Morehouse and a few of the other psychic soldiers were able to describe the actual location where Higgins was being held and explain the scene. Unfortunately, they could not rescue him and he was killed. The next was Pan Am Flight 103, which disappeared above the ocean. Morehouse gave the CIA the plane's location and also said that it blew up because of a terrorist bomb that was hidden in a suitcase. When the team found the plane and investigated the crash, they realized that the remote viewer was correct. David Morehouse wrote an autobiography about his experiences called Psychic Warrior Inside the CIA's Stargate Program, the true story of a soldier's espionage and awakening. After retiring from the military, he spent the rest of his career with a private business teaching remote viewing to other people and going on speaking engagements to talk about UFOs and the power of the human mind. The movie The Men Who Stare at Goats was inspired by Morehouse's book and his life story.
So they talk a lot about The Men Who Stare at Goats, which we all know is a movie with like George Clooney in it, but they are more like making fun of the program. So, I mean, it's interesting that his book inspired it, but I mean, that Hollywood wasn't exactly nice about it either. It's a pretty big mock of the actual program. So, also, this guy does travel around the United States and teach, and they show this on the Third Eye Spies. And he's there, and these are just random people, and he's having them close their eyes and do everything that they need to do, and talks them through an object that he's drawn. Or no, there's somebody at this place. There's somebody here's this person. Now they're at this place. Draw what this person's looking at. And I don't know the percentage, but there's quite a few, because I interviewed him after, drew a waterfall, and they were at the Great Outdoors Sports Center looking at a waterfall, like with the rocks. You know how like when you walk into the Great Outdoors Sports Centers, these huge waterfalls. Anyway, it was really interesting to see just normal people walk in there and take his seminar and then end up drawing what this person saw. So now we're going to talk about the Terry Waite case. In 1987, a British man named Terry Waite was captured by the Islamic Jihad during a hostage negotiation trip with the Church of England. He was kidnapped and kept in solitary confinement in Beirut, Lebanon. In 1988, Project Sunstreak set out to use remote viewing to figure out his location. The remote viewers described Waite's mindset, which was very strong and proud rather than scared and traumatized. They also descriptions of another additional non-speaking hostages that were captured and tortured. They also described the number of guards that were standing by and their daily routines as if it may help with a rescue mission. A psychic soldier known as Viewer 079 described a temple 3 miles outside of Beirut where Terry Waite was being held. It turns out that this information was correct. They released one of the foreign hostages, a German named Rudolf Kords. When he was free, he confirmed all of the information that the remote viewers had described about Terry Waite. Interestingly enough, not even Terry Waite himself knew that there were other people being kept hostage in the same building for 4.5 years because they had all been kept separate from one another. One detail that truly was consistent with the truth that the remote viewer was able to see was his mental stage. Terry Waite left the situation feeling as though he survived without suffering any post-traumatic stress. He said that he was able to talk to a psychologist right away, which he credits as being a part of the reason why he is still mentally healthy. He was able to keep hope alive by thinking about everything he would say when he was able to escape and write a book. Unfortunately, identifying Terry Waite's location was only half the battle, and the U.S. and British armies could not just storm into such a delicate situation. Hostage negotiations with the terrorist group and Lebanese government went on for years, and he was not released until 1991. When he was released, he wrote a book about his experiences and began a project for helping homeless people. A fictionalized version of his story was turned into a movie called Hostages and was released in 1992.
All right, well, let's talk about the Hale-Bopp comet. So 2 civilian remote viewers, a man named Dr. Courtney Brown and a woman named Prudence Calabrese, were asked to examine an object in a photograph near the Hale-Bopp comet. They predicted that it was an alien spaceship headed towards Earth. They described that it was a massive sphere-shaped ship, similar to the Death Star in Star Wars, filled with tunnels, corridors, and multiple rooms. Their visions were reported on the radio, and the reporter repeated multiple times that this was not a fictional story, calling it breaking news. Because of this reporting, people who believe very strongly in the existence of aliens clung on to it as proof that they had believed for years was finally being confirmed. If Brown and Calabrese were to be believed, there was a spaceship headed towards Earth, which may or may not result in an alien invasion. When Prudence Calabrese was interviewed on TV to talk about her predictions, she wore a Star Trek pin. This was obviously a huge red flag because everyone knew that she was a fan of science fiction, and apparently she saw nothing wrong with wearing that. But the rest of the world knew that there was no credibility to her statements that aliens were about to invade the planet. However, for the people who already believed in aliens, they were excited. Brown and Calabrese's phone was ringing nonstop with people who were interested in working with them. A group of diehard believers was formed, calling themselves the Heaven's Gate. This cult believed that when the Hale-Bopp comet passed by Earth, so would the spaceship. They all believed that they were going to be taken away, and the only way to do so would be committing to suicide, so that their soul would float into space and get on the ship. They were all wearing identical outfits, down to their black Nike sneakers. One by one, they drank poison, while the cult members who were still alive would drape a purple shroud over their body until there was only one left. The shame of this scandal was enough to completely ruin Brown and Calabrese's integrity, and it was a sign that the CIA needed to give up looking to psychics for answers. The occasional prediction of an alien invasion wasn't charming anymore. It was dangerous information for people who were mentally ill, and being connected to the military or government in any way gave it too much credibility for them to ignore. This was a sign to the U.S. government that if there was any evidence of alien life, it would be best to keep it silent because there is no way to know how the public might react. However, after the attacks in New York City on September the 11th, 2001, the FBI went back to Brown and Calabrese for any potential information they could view of the location of the terrorists. They began to predict other attacks, but none of them ever came true, and they lost their credibility yet again. Prudence Calabrese became shunned, even in the remote viewing community, because she was seen as being very unprofessional and giving them a bad name. Even to this day, people still believe in remote viewing, and Dr. Courtney Brown continues to give his predictions of the future on his YouTube channel.
So this, and it's interesting when they're talking about how she was wearing that Star Trek pin. So that is huge for the Heaven's Gate cult because they were obsessed with Star Trek. And literally they didn't watch TV or anything, but the only time they would watch TV is they would like hover around this small television and watch Star Trek because that's basically kind of, the kind of way of life that they believed and they wanted. So she shows up on TV talking about this spaceship behind a comet and wearing a Star Trek pen. So that was it for them. That was the huge stepping point that the cult leader, used to get his followers to kill themselves.
Great. Excuse me. Disbanded. Brought in as an outside contractor in 1972, the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, remained the CIA's steadfast partner until the end of the Stargate project. Over time, the SRI would produce dozens of classified documents which would eventually be included in the Project Stargate FOIA release. In their 1995 official assessment of the utility of remote viewing for information warfare, the SRI concluded that it was unlikely that remote viewing would prove of any use in an intelligence gathering. Spookily, however, this assessment was not given because SRI debunked PSI phenomena in any way, but rather because of the suspected characteristics of the phenomena. The SRI found, as had so many institutions that came before it, that you can't bottle the human mind, label it, or sell it. Without funding, the Stargate program died within months. Over the years, skeptics have tried to disprove the work of Project Stargate or dismiss it as nonsense. The movie The Men Who Stare at Goats was based on the program and meant as a complete mockery of it, which I do remember it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask Edwin May, a 20-year-old parapsychologist for Project Stargate and the director in its final decade, you'll find a materialist perspective that strongly supports the phenomenon. May joined Stargate with a doctorate in nuclear physics and aspirations of winning a Nobel Prize, before possibly being the only person who would make a career for himself in parapsychology. And it was largely his pedigree which set up the program with its strict and rigorous standards, bringing the most legitimate approach to the study of something considered woo-woo. When May took over as director, the name was officially changed to Stargate and given the designation of Limited Distribution, LIMDIS. Ostensibly, it seemed that they were on the cusp of something big, but then the program was labeled a waste of money by a conservative general who took over and eventually disbanded it. Or so we are told. Today, May's work continues, funded by nonprofit companies eager for a breakthrough. And though May is a staunch opponent of the mystical ideas surrounding the phenomenon, he has no time for anyone who won't at least look at the evidence and admit there is a statistically significant anomaly occurring. Maybe that's why the program lasted as long as it did, but until there is some sort of indisputable proof, it will remain a contentious topic. And while the members involved in Project Stargate run the gamut in their beliefs, disagreeing but with the ways they've chosen to present their work after the fact, one thing they almost all agree on is that PSI is real.
Yeah, so that's Project Stargate, and you can get on the CIA government site and view the 80,000 documents on it. I mean, hey, they funded it for 20 years. I don't think that if they just continually, took L's in that program, that they would continue it for over 20 years, I guess it was. So I think like anything, it was kind of proven that it's a possibility and that these people have all walked away saying it's real, but in reality, what can you do with it if you're not going to even trust the results? And if they're not 100% all the time, yeah, okay, what do you see? And yes, later it's proved accurate, but it was always a day late and a dollar short because how do you trust those results? So it was kind of just, I think at a certain point they realized, yes, we're getting somewhere with this, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to really act on much of it. And so they just disbanded it. Plus, this guy that took it over was really literally took it over to disband it. That was like, if you watch Third Eye Spies, that's basically the synopsis there, is the guy was not a fan of the program. And when he got a hold of it, he didn't last. It wasn't open much longer. So that's it. That's Project Stargate, y'all. Thank you for following us through our wonderfully foil-lined rabbit hole. And again, there's a ton of stories about what people experienced and saw. And I couldn't, of course, include all of them, but I thought it would be fun to do some of the more interesting ones instead of just all the ones that were for the government. So
Well, it's pretty neat. I mean, again, I always say I appreciate how you bring topics I wouldn't normally probably look into. And so thank you on behalf of me and hopefully on behalf of our listeners who would have enjoyed this topic.
that's the point, isn't it? I guess. I don't know. All right, y'all. Well, I know we all have a hard stop and we got to go. So y'all probably got to go too. Sunday for me, I got a pot roast in the crock pot and I got shit to do today. So I know Moni does, and Yardley's just got back, so he probably wants to get some rest. So with that, we're going to just end it. And I would like to ask you guys to please leave reviews, share our stuff with your friends. We have a wonderful Patreon that is building in followers, and Moni just posted a series of great stuff there. And yeah, and with that, you guys want to give your credits?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at militant_marker.
I am Moni Bear on Twitter and Instagram.
You can find me at Creepin' at Christy on Instagram and Creepin_it on Twitter. And with that, y'all, creep it real. We'll see you on the flip side.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Take ignition and may God's love be